Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sphere of Success, the podcast which looks at challenge and adversity and how we can alchemize that into something that is more positive, long-lasting and sustainable, and that actually when we look back, sometimes those things that we thought were going to break us can turn out to be some of the best things that ever happened in our lives. So it's a great privilege and pleasure today to actually have Steve Manns. He's based in the US. He's just come back from a wonderful tour of Europe and all around Harry Potter land, which sounds fabulous. So I'm sure he's going to tell us a bit more about that as well. But I'm going to read a little bit about Steve because he actually helps, amongst other people, because he's a coach and wellness warrior, which I absolutely love that term. He helps veterans with PTS, and we've just been discussing the distinction between PTS and PTSD. So we'll go into a little bit more depth about that in the podcast. But often I find that things like PTS have come from a place of, in some form of malevolence or something which was so extraordinarily out of our usual sphere. People are incredibly resilient and can often think of the bad times in life, but it doesn't actually progress into PTS, PTSD. And so it's very interesting for me to delve deeper into that, because it's it's one of those things that, as we were discussing, is it or isn't it able to, can you get rid of it, or do you live with it and make it better, etc. So without further ado, I will read a little bit about Steve, give you a flavor of what he's all about. He's very honest as well, very transparent. So that's really, really cool. Back in 2011, he lost his sense of purpose. There were some various things going on in personal life, which often happens. You know, we don't get to be many years into the planet when actually, you know, things start to maybe not go so well. He didn't really know what he wanted to do. He didn't know what his purpose was in the world. And he needed to maybe have a lifestyle reset, a bit of a change. He discovered some deep meaning, a purpose, and he wanted to share this with others. And learning and developing ourselves and sharing it with others, which I know is just it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. It's a really great calling to have. And as always, some people were not quite ready in their learning journey. And I know that if a few years ago you'd have asked me about this whole business about personal development, wellness, etc., I wouldn't have had the ears to hear, as they said. And you know what? That's fine, because we all come to things at different times and we have to be right in ourselves to be able to take that on. So what he's looking to do is help people finding their reason why. And that's just a wonderful gift to give to people, is to maybe open up areas to look in and go, okay, I can understand what life is about. You know, it's just like, well, what meaning does life have? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Is it just mundane and just got to get through it? Or actually, is there a real purpose? So today I want to discuss, as I said, this whole idea of finding ourselves, finding out who we are. And I guess, well, of course I know who I am, you know, I'm a mum, or I'm a dad, or I do a job, or I have a business, or I like sport. But is that really us deep down? So without further ado, welcome, Steve, to the Sphere of Being podcast. It's absolutely wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Great stuff. So let's delve a little into then this reason why you had a change in your life, and what was that catalyst that brought you from where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, so I just have a flood of emotions that kind of flow out here, but you know, I got to a point where I know I needed to make a change, and there was a bunch of other things going on in my life. I was in the middle of these divorce process. My wife at the time had lost this business that we had been very involved in, and I know this might seem a little superficial, but I saw a few pictures of myself that I was like, I don't really recognize that person, you know, and I was like, I've got to do something about this. I got to have some sort of reset, of what I want to do, who I am, what do I want to be, what do I, you know, want to look like, what kind of example do I want to be for, my kids. So I started looking for ways to change, and I found a book called The Primal Blueprint. That book was very scientifically and ancestral health, had its roots in ancestral health, and it just all made sense to me. So I started living by those principles, and I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. I felt a lot better about myself. That brain fog sort of lifted off of me. I was able to think more clearly. I was more organized. And, you know, as I was working other jobs, I was like, I need to find something to sort of prove to myself that I've made a change. So when I work with some people, we call that, setting a big, hairy, audacious goal, like a physical goal. So I started searching for what could I do. I used to run a lot in high school and a little bit in college, and I was like, well, I don't want to do straight races is what I call them, like the races that you just run 5 or 10K. I needed something more, and I happened to find a website that was talking about this obstacle course racing stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, I could run and be on a mountain and do some obstacles to kind of prove to myself. I really didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time, but I signed up anyway. And I did the race, and I came off the mountain after about 4 miles and 20 obstacles. And I was just like on cloud nine. I'd found something that, really sparked my interest, and I wanted to do it again that day. Cooler heads prevailed that particular day, and I didn't do it again. But I eventually did a few more races throughout the year. And yeah, then I was like, well, how can I share this with other people? And at that time, Spartan Race, which is an obstacle course racing series, had a program where you could be trained to be a Spartan coach. So I was like, duh, I have to do that. That's like something I have to do. So I got involved in that. I became a personal trainer, and I started helping people get ready for obstacle course racing. Then I started working for the company, and on the events at different locations and blah blah blah. That's just side story. And then in 2017, the book that I read, The Primal Blueprint, came up with a health coaching program that kind of used those principles to train people to be coaches. So I got involved in that. I became a level 2 coach through the Primal Health Coach Institute, and I became national board certified. So now I could share all of those things that I learned through ancestral health and the journey that I took through Spartan to help people get where they wanted to be, whether that's physically or mentally or whatever. Spartan Race is a good challenge, not only for your physical, but also for your mental capacity to overcome things. So that was my path on getting trained to help people get them where they want to go in their lives. And like we talked about before, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got him after I read that book, but it was kind of an evolution of, oh, okay, well, I did all these cool things. I got myself trained in all those things. So now I can help people do what they want to do to help change their lives in a bunch of different ways. So that's kind of the story that of how I kind of evolved into this new life of being a health coach and a trainer.
Oh, that's really interesting that you found something that kind of lit a fire in you and you went, yeah, that's cool. Did that happen by a lot of research, or was it something that kind of came up and crept behind you and went, well, here I am?
Yeah, it was totally one of those things where I just kind of, I don't even know what made me buy that book or where I even found it. It just kind of like appeared one day. I'm sure there's more to it than that if I really thought about it, but and then I just lived by it and then I changed and then Spartan just fell out of the internet into my lap and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that.
But
And then
interestingly, isn't it interesting that where your
yeah,
thoughts went, where your focus was going, where your, what do they say? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. I think that's
yeah,
the phrase. Please let me know if I've got that wrong. But
right.
you were actively thinking, what can I do? How can I change? What is it that I need to, and it's as if kind of by magic, bringing back the Harry Potter theme, but it's almost like if you're open to these things, all of a sudden something comes in and you go, oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And you couldn't necessarily have planned that for yourself. I don't know what you think about that.
No, definitely not. It's like as you were saying that, I was thinking about, it's about saying yes to some things. And I think a lot of people get into that loop where, okay, they're doing their little thing and anything outside of that, they kind of just say no to, or they're like, not that laser focus is bad, but sometimes you need some extra little thing in your life to keep things spicy or to keep things alive in you. And how many people nowadays are just like, okay, I got to go to work, I come home, go to bed, get up, go to work, get my coffee, you know, go to
Mm.
bed.
Well, yeah. And I think that repetitive nature, sometimes it's good to add a bit of variety in. And they often say, don't they? I think that you'll know more than me about this, the neuroplasticity, the
Yeah,
wiring in our brain, if it becomes too automated, because I think there's a weird statistic, like if at the age of about 30 odd, we're 95% driven by our unconscious programs.
yeah,
And sometimes we can fall into things and we don't realize that actually, you know what, this is just repeating a Groundhog Day. You know that film with Bill, was it
that's
Bill
right.
Murray, where he's trapped in this Groundhog Day thing and he just can't seem to free himself. And sometimes we can feel like that. It's like the whole week has gone by and actually it was completely the same as I did. And that's then gets to me, it's that's why, what's the point? When again, that's the
Yeah.
thing, isn't it? What's the point? What's the point of life if it's just going to be like this?
And hopefully, if somebody listens to this podcast and they're in that kind of, loop, they can say, okay, well, if they don't get anything else out of it, like, well, what else is there for me? Maybe it's gone on a big hike that they have never done before or have thought about when they were, a kid or when they were growing up or, early adulthood, whatever, we only live once. Let's have fun doing it, right?
Well, that's it. And you mentioned something that was really important there, I thought. What can I do for me? Because so many people out there, and I'd love your thoughts on this. The thing is, we give so much to other people, we do so much for others. We're always thinking of other people, and it's kind of drilled into us, that you should do that, especially, and I'm not saying not for guys, but for women, it's just like, you're almost given a badge of honor the more that you give to others. And sometimes it's good to say, what am I going to do for me? What do I want to do? What do I want to get myself involved with and enthused with? And you could be a busy parent, busy at work, both parent and work. You could have all the demands, but I'd like to hear your views on how important is it to really give the meanness of us the chance to experience new things.
I think it's huge. And one thing I always say to people that I work with is that you need to take care of number one, so you are better able to take care of all those people that you love and that you work with. And when you don't take care of number one, they're not getting the best of you, you know. And the self-care thing is super huge. You know, I talk about like 6 or 7 things when I'm talking with, you know, clients, you know, or just people in general. And they're basically all self-care. You know, your nutrition is self-care. Um, your exercise is self-care. Your nature connection, which I love, is self-care. Your social connection is self-care. How you handle stress is self-care. You know, how you sleep and prepare for sleep. That's all self-care stuff. And, you know, people don't think about those things as, you know, that's how I take care of myself. They're just going through the motions. But, you know,
What
how do
would
we
you
optimize
say?
nutrition, exercise,
Yeah.
sleep, how
But
we
what would
deal
you
with
say to
stress?
somebody that says, well, I never put myself in the equation, and to do so would be selfish and arrogant, and I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, well, let's jump in just and use sleep as an example of that. I don't know if you, Deborah, if you've ever experimented with sleep at all, but there was a challenge given to me one time, not directly, but through like some information I was listening to. It's like the person said, if you get 6 hours of sleep, try 7. If you get 7 hours of sleep, try 8. So I did that. I tried 8, and I was like, whoa, this is a major game changer. You know, I am like alert all day and I can do whatever I want. And that was just 1 hour of sleep, you know?
Yeah.
Um, how would that impact you? Or how would that impact, you know, that person?
And
And
the people around you and your loved ones and those people that you are
yeah,
doing all the stuff for, they're going to see you in a better way, and you're not exhausted at that
exactly.
point. So you can give more of yourself, I'm guessing, which is fundamentally brilliant. And yeah, I'm a great exponent of in the nicest possible way, without arrogance or thinking that I'm being selfish, is that it is me first. Because if I'm not right, and it never used to be, but if I'm not right, I realize I can't be the best I can be for others. And
Right.
that's how I want to show up. So we talked about the whole area a little bit about the PTS, the post-traumatic stress, especially within veterans. Could you describe to us what is PTS?
So there's a lot of different ways and to describe it, and you know, people will give you different viewpoints, and you know, people might not agree with what I have to say about it, but um, you know, PTS, post-traumatic stress, I think if you go back in your own life, you could probably think of, you know, not too many people have escaped, you know, some kind of stress from an event that happened to them. Um, so we all probably have some kind of post-traumatic stress. So I think PTSD, sometimes people will use that as a label. And, you
Is
know,
that because of the word disorder
yeah,
with a D? Mm.
yeah. Even like, you know, ADD, you know, I know people that say, well, I have ADD, so that, and they dismiss things. I'm not saying that about PTSD, but, you know, thinking about that as, okay, I do have post-traumatic stress, and it could be overbearing, or it could be, you know, moderate, you know, or it could be low level. Um, and I found with working with the veterans that I work with is that doing those self-care things really have made a big difference. Now, the level of PTS that we work with, and this will come from the person that actually organizes the coaches of the coaching group that we work with. He feels like the sweet spot is kind of like moderate PTS.
Well, just explain what are people displaying? What are they having in their lives to have moderate PDS? Because I'm sure there are some people out there who perhaps have it and just think they just having a terrible time, and they don't realize, rather than putting a label on it, but they don't necessarily know what it could be. So
Right.
yeah, just share with us, if you wouldn't mind, what kind of constitutes the symptoms and the behaviors of PTS.
Oh, that might take a few weeks just because
When I
it
said
may,
it, I thought that's probably pretty deep.
yeah, it can manifest itself in so many different ways, like so many different ways, and for different people. And our coaching group, we are not therapists, so it's not like we are directly working to, you know, I don't think you can say you can cure PTS, D, but we're not specifically trained to like be therapists for PTS. So we are working with all of those self-care things that we've talked about, the nutrition, the exercise, the sleep, the stress, the social connection, and the nature connection to make them the best version of themselves so they can see how they can better serve the people in their lives.
So would it
So,
sort of think, if somebody was suffering from, say, panic attacks or anxiety and stress, depression, maybe, just feeling just pretty horrendous, is that the kind of things that people who you help, is this the kind of thing that you help for them to maybe come more to terms with what it is and maybe help in ways which can alleviate things?
So I do want to say that we're not medical. I'm not a medical
Yeah.
professional. So, jumping into that particular thing is not kind of like my wheelhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not what I'm specifically trained to do. So in any of those cases, obviously, I would say, work in conjunction with your therapist to work on these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can work parallel to that because therapists there's not a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
As I found out from, talking to people, there's just not a lot of therapists around. And, having a coach to work in conjunction with that, either directly with therapists or, working on all the things that we've talked about, to they do the hard work in therapy, and then we can do the self-care work on the outside, and they kind of work hand in hand to,
Yeah.
make that person better. And
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about N equals one. So in every single case, it is N equals one. So what that means is that we are all an experiment, right? And we have to find what works best for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of these things might work great for one person and they might need to be changed for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what works for you, Deborah, is not going to work for me,
Absolutely,
theoretically.
because we're all beautifully individuals. So
Yeah,
I get you.
exactly.
Mm.
And we all have a different life experience. And, as far as PTS goes, each one of those is completely different. And our physiology is going to dictate somewhat as to how our body reacts to that too.
Mm.
So it is never like a one size, fits all thing. In fact, I would say one size doesn't fit two people.
So it's all very individual,
It's
and
all
people
super
then
individual.
use this, from what I'm hearing, is that they use it and then they identify with what works for themselves,
Yeah.
and then they can implement the whole of those different pillars that you were talking about
Right.
to actually bring a course of actions and circumstances and
Right.
results that are very meaningful for them. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing is you did mention sleep, and I'm very open with this because I believe in transparency, and it can help people if they're going through this journey. But I'm an abuse and trauma survivor. And I mean, I really don't think I slept as a child because I had to be vigilant in case,
Right.
of issues. So people say, how can you exist on hardly any sleep? And I'm sure it did a lot of damage over the years for my body. I'm very blessed that I didn't have more of an issue because of the lack of sleep for the large part of my life. As it turns out, I didn't probably get any decent REM sleep for many years. And you mentioned about 8 hours. Well, I still struggle. I have to say, I struggle with 8 hours of sleep because I think that would, yeah, I can work on it, but I'm always kind of like awake, say at 6 hours, and that's seems to be the optimum time for me. And
Right.
every now and again, if I've been working super hard or been doing something that's really focused or energetic or all of at once, then it has been known that I can sleep for about 11 hours, just flat out.
Right.
So, I'm one thing I would say to people, if you find that you've got a bout of insomnia where you can't sleep, I always say, well, it's not the end of the world. I try not to get too het up about it, because if I start to become more stressed about not sleeping, then I'm not going to sleep and I'm going to be stressed because I can't
Right.
sleep. So I just kind of either read a book, or I might get up, or I just say, tonight, it's not the night for sleep. There you go. This is just going to happen. I bet tomorrow night I will sleep like a log because I'll be
Yeah.
exhausted by then.
But that also brings up an opportunity to say, what am I doing before sleep to
Mm.
set myself up for a good night's sleep? Um,
Well, mine is always that little thought. I don't drink hardly any caffeine anyway, so it's not anything like that. And I don't drink
right.
alcohol, and I eat well before I go to bed, so I'm not going to bed on a full stomach. And
Awesome.
I do some like nice warm bath, lavender oil, get it all sort of things so that
Awesome.
I'm rested and I don't look at the device. And I do all of that. But sometimes, and I think we've all had it, you're just about to, and then this thought comes in your head, and it's a nagging, irritable thought about something. And
Right.
then it's like, oh no, it'll go away. Oh, no way.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a lot of great things for like setting yourself up for a good night's sleep, but most people are not doing that.
Mm,
And, taking a deep dive and figuring out how do we set ourselves up for a good night's sleep. And that's just like one thing. And you mentioned food, you mentioned, warm bath, um, you know, getting that relaxation in beforehand, you know, um, sounds like a popular, not popular, but a intense thought comes into your mind every once in a while. So, that happens.
yeah.
And trying to calm our brains down is, something that's like super important. And, but sometimes we can't avoid it, right?
And that's when I don't get too stressed about it, because I know at some point, even if it's a couple of days and it's not great sleep, then I just think, well, hey, whatsoever, it's gonna be okay
Right.
soon. And it usually is. And I'd love to hear more about the wellness, obviously, with these different pillars, and that it's all interrelated. Just thinking about exercise, and as you're saying, you were doing the Spartan races and all the obstacle courses. How did that exercise actually translate into a more alert, more calm, um, but in the sense of more energy kind of lifestyle? I'm intrigued by exercise because it's an interesting one as to how that can really help people to overcome various issues. So yeah, please do tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that's another N equals one thing. It's so different for everybody. Um, but and it almost seems like, counterintuitive sometimes, you do a workout and you're gonna get more
Mm.
energy from that. Doesn't make sense. I'm using all this energy here. How can I get more energy on the other side? But, it's all about getting that momentum, that movement momentum, and getting your body active. So let's take it back, 500 years or whatever. And, think about what we were doing 500 years ago, right? As far as exercise go. Um,
We'd be walking a lot more. We might be
Hmm.
riding horses. Everything was much more manual.
Right.
We'd be outside more. We wouldn't have all the gadgets, the labor-saving devices that we had before. Even washing clothes was an arduous task. So I'm guessing that we would be kind of more active in the whole.
Yeah, we were super active. Now, were we like, do you think that, 500 years ago or even 1,000 years ago that we were like doing super heavy, laborious things every single day?
Yeah, I guess carrying water and heavy logs and cutting down trees and digging the earth and animal husbandry and
Yeah.
yeah, I guess so. I'm running after animals to get them for food and hides and what have you, or growing crops and tending to those. So yeah, I'm guessing
Yeah,
it would be pretty tough.
so it was probably more on the exertion side, but you probably weren't like completely dead after like 15 minutes worth of exercise, right? Like
I
you'll
guess
see some
like looking at
you'll see
kids,
some
they
people
seem
now
to
where they
run
go to the gym and
forever.
they're just like wiped out for, hours afterwards. But it probably wasn't like that. You know, we probably did more low low intensity workouts or workout for most of the day, right? Like you said, we're probably walking a lot more. We're
Yeah.
probably, carrying things. So,
Mm.
if you were carrying a load of, even if you were carrying like a lamb, I remember seeing what
Well, they're
Wales said they
heavy.
had like 9 million lambs in Wales and there was only like 3 million people. But, carrying a lamb, certain amount of distance wasn't probably too hard, right? But I think what was different from today compared to then is that we're just active all the time. We're
Yeah.
just in movement all the time. You know,
Yeah.
you mentioned like we're on our devices now. So if you're on your device, generally speaking, you're not moving.
Yeah.
Even us right now, we're not doing any work. We're just kind of sitting,
Sedentary
taking
and
up
yeah.
space.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back then we were moving all the time, you know, not necessarily intense, but we were moving all the time. And,
Mm.
you know, so think about that. That's a good kind of like gateway for people to think about as far as exercise goes is, it doesn't have to be intense. It could be like getting out for a walk, you
Mm.
know? There's a bunch of different gateways for exercise. Like some people getting out for a walk is a big deal. So let's do those little things. And it's all about starting small first. And then once you gain momentum, then you can do some of the bigger stuff. So there's some crazy people out there like me that would be like, okay, I can do a Spartan race, next month. Let's go. But, for most people, let's go out for a walk. Let's, you know, play. I think that
Oh, that's a
I
good
think play
one.
is probably like
Play is great.
the most under underappreciated part of fitness, and I forgot to mention that because I do talk about play and
Play in
yeah,
general.
yeah,
And,
rediscovering your
having
play.
fun, having play around or engaged in a good conversation, and that's play, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Play is so important.
I
And
worked with somebody that hadn't been like on their mountain bike for 20 years because kids came and the job came. And then the person got on the mountain bike. They're like, oh my God, I felt the most alive I felt in such a long time.
Yeah,
I worked with somebody that was a drummer and he was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm getting too old to be a drummer, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's what you love to do. You know, go beat the
absolutely.
drum, go play in your band. That's what's keeping you young. That's your play. So we got to do it, whatever your play is. And we totally lose sight of what our play is when we get to be an adult.
Well, do you know, I've got this little dog, and every now and again her nose appears on the podcast because I pick her up and she's there. She's asleep at the moment, thank goodness, because I record while she's still in the same room with me. But
Yeah.
she's a Dachshund, one of those wiener dogs. She's quite a big
Yeah.
wiener dog. She's naturally a big dog, but she's
Yeah.
quite low down. And when I first got her, I hadn't realized I thought it was quite fit because I was walking every day around the park and everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm cool. I got this little puppy and I thought I got the flu because every bone in my body and joints have started to ache. And I'm like, what's going on? And then I realized I was bending down, kneeling down, getting on the floor, picking her up, putting her outside, playing with her, bending over, stretching. And no wonder my muscles were going, oh my
What
goodness.
are you doing, Deborah?
Absolutely. And now, I mean, it's just like takes me nothing if I want to bend down or squat down to be on her level. And when
Right.
I'm grooming her, I groom her on the floor so that I bend down and I can get up. My legs have got stronger, my tummy muscles, my abdomen has got tighter, my arms have got more flexible because I'm now actively working with her, playing with her, getting her out for a walk every single day, whether it's
Yeah.
raining or sunny or whatever. We'll have to go out later because it's quite hot here. But, you know, that's the thing, that's a non-negotiable because she needs that. And
Right.
sometimes I can be out for like, I don't over exercise her because we're not walking at the same pace all the time. But
Right.
say 3 hours, we've mooched about the countryside, she's sniffed, we've looked at the trees, we've done all these sorts of things. And I tell you what, this is such a blessing for my mental health as well. And I'd love to think about now how you turn this from a mental addition and a benefit to that, because I would never necessarily have thought that having this healthy lifestyle would benefit my mental health.
Yeah. So that brings me to one thing I always talk with people about is the nature connection. So if you believe in evolution and that humans have been on this planet for, 200,000, 2 million years, whatever that time limit is, I'm not sure we'll ever know, but 99.9 repeating, we've been outside and it's only been 0.0001% of humans' existence that we've been in these boxes and
Mm.
confined to these boxes where we're not out in nature all the time. We're not smelling the smells. We're not listening to the birds. We're not getting dirty in the soil or playing with animals like you've discovered. And, you know, what can that do? That's only going to depress our mental, acuity, right? I don't care how intense you are in your job and how much you study. Um, you need some breaks from that. And nature is one of those things that you can just go out and do. And, studies have even shown that if you have a picture in your office, a nature picture, that could elicit some of the same chemical releases as going outside. So if you are like
Wow.
confined into these walls of wherever you are, and you have maybe a window, I have a beautiful window here with the outside, but like some paintings or pictures of the outdoors that could elicit some of the same response. Obviously, it's not as good, but some of that is better than none.
That's so interesting. I never knew that you could be looking at a lovely painting or beautiful photograph or something of nature scene and actually feel like you're a part of it. I love that. No, I'd never even begun to think that you could do that. That's really interesting. And the other thing is as well, we very recently had electricity, which meant that we didn't have to rely on the sun and the moon and the stars. And that again, because, I think there's something to do with wealth of a country and the ability to have a longer day and energy. And so we've become wealthier because we've got more time to be productive in and learn, because if you haven't got any light, you can't read a book or what have you to learn.
Right.
So I was thinking, with these 8 hours sleep, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and, it can get dark in the UK at like, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, middle of winter.
Right.
And
Right.
then it's not light again properly until about 7:30. So
Yeah.
all that time, if you didn't, okay, you'd have the light of the fire maybe, and this is before the days of candles, so you might have had a
Right.
torch of some sort, but you'd be asleep, wouldn't you? You'd be
Yeah.
well into that circadian rhythm of
Exactly.
night and day, and that would just be a normal thing, wouldn't it, really?
Right. And now if you live in a big city and you don't have like blackout curtains, I mean, there's light coming in your house all the time. I
Mm.
don't live super close to the city, but if we don't pull our like blackout curtains out, then there's light coming in. And our skin's photosensitive, so any light can elicit that cortisol release to tell you to get up. And with consistent amount of light pollution in the world, that's only making us more stressed out and, you know, not in tune with our circadian rhythms and ultradian rhythms and everything else.
Well, they do say that we are attuned to the moon and how that affects our sleep. And people, as they say, in hospitals and in police places, they say that a full moon, it can really elicit some strange goings on because people are affected by the full moon. Apparently, crime goes up and accidents happen more, and all sorts of things happen because of the full moon and that extra light and what have
Yeah,
you. I suppose it's interesting to get into that natural rhythm. And I think some people, I think there's a movement more of to fashion your life more around things like the way in which the moon is and how that affects us, etc. Because I suppose it's like anything. I've got my little dog in my house, but she's not designed for living inside, is she? She's a dog.
right.
Until recently, before we domesticated them, she'd be making a little nest somewhere outside that was
Yeah,
as far away from danger and, got
right,
shelter and what have you, but she wouldn't be inside sleeping in a nice warm house on a nice cozy cushion.
right. I, you bring up a great point, and I never thought about it before that maybe this full moon thing is the reason why these weird things happen. And I'm just, spitballing here, but it's like, okay, well, maybe that's eliciting a cortisol response in some people, that they get when the sun comes up and making them more stressed out. And, maybe, they say kids are more, hyper during the full moon time, but maybe that's because they don't have blackout curtains and moonlight's getting in and it's causing them some extra stress hormones.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're such an amazing composite of all these different things. I always say that we're all miracles. The fact that, we were born human beings, because I was at a point where I thought, what's the point? Like yourself,
Right.
really. But actually, when we look at ourselves and just the way that which we are, that's a miracle in itself. So I've long ago thought, well, actually, and it's not arrogant because everybody is special in the true
Right.
sense of the word, but I'm special, So to say, oh, what's the point? The mere fact that we're a human being is the point, so we've kind of won the lottery in that regard to be on this planet as a human being. I mean,
Right.
we're very, very fortunate. So it doesn't happen to a lot of the animal kingdom or vegetation or being a rock. I'm sure they have their own experiences, but being a
Right.
human being is pretty much up there. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm grateful. And what I'd like to end on is how important then is diet? Because you said you lost like 10 pounds a month for 3 months. That's an insane amount of weight to lose in that short period of time. I'm sure people will be going, "Oh my God, how did he do that? What did he change in his diet to be able to see that remarkable difference?"
Yeah. So again, it's n equals one, but there's like certain things that you can definitely do to get yourself in the right direction. Um, Especially in the US, there's a lot of processed food, and processed food can really hijack your hormones. It can hijack how your insulin responds to everything. So the number one thing to try to do is to get rid of processed food. It's, super hard unless you're super diligent, but you know, the Twinkies and this, I guess you call them crisps and
Oh yeah, potato chips in the States, yes, crisps
yeah,
over
right.
here. Yes, yes.
But that's probably the number one thing to do is to get rid of processed food.
And fizzy drinks and things like that, I don't think they're great for you either,
Yeah.
are they?
Yeah, never drink your sugar, and even, don't even drink your fruit. If you're going to have fruit, eat your fruit instead of drinking your fruit,
Yeah,
because most of the time they take most of the good things out of there when they make fruit juice. So, yeah,
yeah.
getting a straight sugar hit's probably not the best thing to do. But
Yeah, that's why kids get hyper at breakfast because they're having the sugary cereals. They might have
yeah,
orange juice, and you
right.
think it's all. Sometimes they got on the UK, they've got these little kind of markers, and they'll have green for good and all that. And often these because there's no however they do it, that's like green on everything. Oh, that's going to be healthy then. Well,
Yeah,
not really, because it's super processed, it's full of sugar. Somehow they managed to get that into a green. I think that's a serving suggestion. And if you ate the serving suggestion and that alone, you would be so hungry that you'd be eating something else. So it's not like most people stick to the serving size proportion that's suggested,
yeah,
because otherwise you'd be like, oh, I'm still hungry.
yeah. And I think when you get rid of the processed food, your body starts changing, and it starts allocate the energy sources a little bit differently. So our bodies are lazy, so if we're going to give it sugar, it's just going to use the sugar.
So
But
what you're saying then is not all calories are equal.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I just got that vibe from you, is to say
Yeah,
calories from sugar are not the same as calories, let's say, from tomato. It's maybe
right,
not
right.
as, yeah, yeah.
The example that I use all the time is like your body's going to totally react differently to 200 calories worth of Skittles compared to 200 calories worth of broccoli,
Mm,
right? Like, okay, what's broccoli coming with? It's coming with some vitamins, some fiber,
mm,
some, you know, other things,
yeah,
but Skittles is just like pure sugar. So, are those two sets of 200 calories the same?
no. And the thing is as well, I think with that sugar, is that the body, I think, is always trying to find a nutritional value out of something that it's ingesting.
Yeah,
And what I've come to realize is they also said for many years that grains and things are really healthy for us. Well, when we were doing all of that daily stuff and we were fetching water and we were looking after animals and we were chopping down trees and we were hard thing, well, actually, what, you probably could, but the fact is you wouldn't be able to eat that much grain anyway, because you'd need to be eking it out over the year because you need it to last, but also you
yeah,
probably weren't having it in that much quantity. It would be less refined, and it would be pure, and they'd grind it up themselves, etc., and you'd share in it. Probably wouldn't have that much of it, to be fair. And so
And it wouldn't have the pesticides on it.
absolutely wouldn't have the pesticides on it. So when you're eating that kind of stuff, um, it's like your body would only have a bit of it. And now in a slice of like processed bread, you can have all sorts of stuff in there, plus
Yeah,
too much of the gluten or what have you. And no
right.
wonder our bodies reacted, because it's like, I can't process all of this stuff that's coming
Yeah,
in, and the volume of what we're intaking as well.
right.
So I cut a lot of the grains out, the processed grains and like the breads and stuff. And if I'm honest, I've got a slow cooker. It's a brilliant investment. And I soak my beans overnight, and I pop them in on a low heat for 4 hours. I've got it off pat now. I make my own yogurt. And you know what? It's that making something, that actual, I love my food because I'm
Right,
making it, I'm seeing it, all the process of it, I'm getting involved with it, I'm getting the smells of it, I'm stirring it, I'm
right.
chopping stuff up and putting it in. And it's just like, I feel like I've achieved something when I sit
Yeah,
down
that's
to eat
awesome.
what I've made. So
Your
that
own little dopamine hit from making your own food. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, and one thing I realized, because I live on my own, I haven't got anybody else to cook for, is I was
Right,
getting pretty lazy. I might open some cereal and just have some milk and cereal because, well, it's only me. So, but now
right.
I've got into that whole thing about the food. I really look forward to it. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
this will be
that's
good.
awesome. Yeah,
So it's a different way of looking at things, isn't it?
right. Yeah, and if we think about what our body wants nutrition. So when you have something that just has like sugar and processed grains in it, there's really no nutrition in it. And I always like to think about like, okay, your body's like, hey, you put this stuff in, you promised me some nutrition, and you gave me all this sugar. I want nutrition. So I'm just going to make you hungry again. So you feed me some nutrition.
Yeah,
Feed
yeah,
me some food that's nutritious. And, if we get into that cycle where we're just like feeding ourselves sugar and never giving our body any nutrition, then what choice do we have but to, gain weight?
yeah.
Because our body's telling us to eat something that it actually wants, and we're
I
not
tell you
doing that.
what, you're right. If I eat the right stuff, I get full pretty quickly. And
Right,
I'm not craving stuff. And I always say, I don't try and eat late because of my going to sleep and all of that. But I read
right,
somewhere that fasting is pretty good. And the best way for me to fast is overnight, where I'm not, I'm not wanting to think, oh, I want some food.
right, right,
So I do that overnight. So I can tag a few hours either way from when I wake up, from when I go to bed. And that's been really useful to actually get that fasting in. So yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I know this is a different conversation for a different day, but it sounds like your body is becoming fat adapted instead of sugar adapted. So,
Well, the interesting thing is, I put coconut high grade oil, not, sort of nasty oils, but I put
right,
extra virgin cold pressed raw organic, whatever it's called, olive oil. I've got my coconut oil in there. I've got hemp seed oil. Sometimes put flaxseed oil in there. And people will go, oh, the oil is going to make you so fat. And I'm like, well, not really. Look at me. It's weird. I think it has a better effect for me. I can't speak for anybody else because somebody might be completely different than me. But when I put that oil in, one, it's filling, but
right.
two, and I also have either lemon juice or apple cider vinegar that I put on my food after I've cooked it. And it doesn't have a weird taste or anything. It's fine. You don't even really notice it. But
Right.
with that as well as the oil, and people say, your skin looks so great. And I'm like, I think it's got well with the hydration as well, but I
Right.
think it's got something to do with this thing with the oil and the acidic thing and what have you. So I'm not
Yeah.
stopping it. It's a lot cheaper than buying expensive face creams, that's for sure.
Yeah. And next time we come to the UK, we're gonna have a chat because it seemed like almost everything that we looked at in the grocery store had like rapeseed oil in it, or actually almost everything had rapeseed oil in it. And we couldn't find anything that we had a really hard time finding things that didn't have it in.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we do grow a lot of that crop.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like a cheaper alternative. But and this is a thing. I invest my money into good quality, you know, things like the cold pressed organic raw coconut. And people go,
Yeah.
why? It's because that's where the goodness is. And I don't need that much of it, but I
Right.
know that it's the goodness that I need. And once I've had that, my body goes, I don't need that much of it. You don't have to, literally put gallons of it on.
Right.
And so those types of things, it's an investment, yes, but they probably last you longer in the longer term. So actually probably evens itself out. And I just know that it's good for me. So that's why I make that decision to pay that little bit more to get that
Right.
kind of product. And then you don't have to have as much of it.
And the other angle of that is, okay, you're taking care of yourself now so that you don't have those, well, I don't know how it works in the UK, but so you don't have those big medical bills later because you haven't taken care of yourself. So I like to describe it as, okay, how can I make my lifespan equal to my health span? So health
Mm,
span is how long you live in a healthy state, and lifespan is your whole life. So how can we make those equal at the end? You know, because most people are not even close.
yeah.
People are usually really sick and take a long time going downhill before they actually pass. And I'm not interested in that.
Well, but then again, it's never too late. And
Right. It is
the
never
thing
too late.
is, our bodies come back like you wouldn't believe. We are
Yeah.
amazing on what
Right.
you think the damage that people have done to themselves. And I used to drink alcohol. I don't anymore. I didn't drink much of it, I'm very pleased to say. And I'd never, thank goodness, I never actually liked cigarettes. I know, I think I've only had the one sort of try and I'm like, oh no, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So I was very blessed with that. But, even when I did have alcohol, they even say a little is too much. So I know that my body regenerated very quickly after
Yeah.
giving up the alcohol. And again, caffeine, there's obviously schools of thought, I'm not going to go into it. And I always
Right.
say it's everybody's choice. I'm not pontificating or
Right.
saying you should
Exactly.
do anything because we're all adults and we can all make up our own minds. But I
Right.
just know that the benefits are great energy, feeling so much more positive and happy in life,
Yeah.
feeling that I've got my purpose, feeling I can contribute. It just feels right from that perspective. So,
Right.
I'm not going to stop it now.
Exactly. That would be counterintuitive, right?
Well, absolutely, and people think, oh, you're weird. You're not going out and having all of this and the fried foods and what have you. And I'm like, well, yeah, well, I'm weird. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, whatever.
Your taste buds turn over every about 2 or 3 weeks. So if you can like get through a spot where you don't have something for 2 or 3 weeks, there's a good chance that you can just drop it.
Exactly. That's a good metaphor for life. Try and
That's
get
right.
something 2 or 3 weeks, and then you might think, "Oh, I don't really need that so much. It's
Wow.
pretty cool."
I don't need those Skittles anymore.
In fact, the next time I probably have anything, I'd like, nah, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm one of those people, give me an apple. I'm just like, really? Uh, oh,
Uh,
Steve, I know we could talk forever. I know
I
it's a
think we probably
brilliant
could.
subject. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how can people get hold of you?
Yeah. So my website is wellnesswarrior.coach. Um, my email is steve@wellnesswarrior.coach. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for my name in LinkedIn. Um, I'm on many social media platforms. At wellnesswarrior.coach seems like to be a theme. I think my TikTok is at Steve Manns. So yeah, any of those places will be fine.
Oh, well, that's perfect. And thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you. It's a subject that's close to my heart because I always think God gave us this great body, or if you believe in the universe or Allah or whatever you believe in, we have been blessed with the most amazing
Right.
opportunity as human beings. And if we can optimize that in whatever way we can, then that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about breathing and meditation, so it'll have to be for another time.
Brilliant. I think that's where I just probably need a little bit of extra help on the old breathing. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, excellent. So, thank you again, Steve. It's
Awesome.
been wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a really fun hour.
Yes, it has. And again, for everybody listening and watching, thank you. I hope this has given you some inspiration. Do like and comment and subscribe because your comments would be great. Tell us what you're doing or not doing. Nobody's judging anybody here.
Right.
I've got it wrong more times than I've got it right. So, I
For
certainly
sure.
pass judgment. Don't judge anybody. And have a chat with Steve because he's really great at helping you optimize and moving from one state to another and really getting a fulfilling life at whatever age you are, whatever stage you are. It's never, ever, ever too late. So it's always good to start at some point. So until next time, everybody, take care and we'll see you all again very soon.